Dear viewers, wherever you are, hello and welcome to this new episode of your program, Spectra. You and I and everyone are the sum total of what we read, what we watch, and what we hear. And this happens throughout our life, but especially during the years of our infancy and youth. And the years of infancy and youth happen to be the years of education. That's why education plays a pivotal role in shaping our future and our characters and personalities. Education can play a major role and is a great catalyst in pushing us forward to becoming more moderate or more extreme in our social, political, or religious views. So, what is the real role of education, and how deeply can it affect our beliefs? To shed more light into this and to delve deeper into the crypts of education, I'm really delighted to be accompanied by Sherry Ariane. Sherry has extensive experience in education in both the United States and in the Middle East. Sherry, hello and welcome to the program.
Hello, Mohammed.
Hi,
How
Sherry.
are you?
Thanks. It's always a pleasure having you here in the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, it's all mine. And to start off, Sherry, as someone who has this extensive experience in education in both the United States and the Middle East, and there are two very different parts of the world, but in your own terms, in your own words, how can you define education?
So it is my opinion and my belief that education is learning how to think. Not just learning a bunch of pieces of information, but really learning how to think about the pieces of information that we have and how to synthesize them to make sense to us.
And, we receive different stages, we go through different stages of education. We have the elementary or education, or what is called the primary education in some countries, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And then we have the intermediate or the intermediary stage, and then the advanced stage or the senior stage or the high school stage, and then the university. In your opinion, again, which is the most pivotal period of these?
I think the beginning years, the elementary, like preschool, kindergarten, and all these elementary levels are pivotal in how a student thinks about education, whether they like it or not, understands what's happening around them, and relates to the community through their education.
So you think the inception, the very beginning, is the most important one, where you lay the foundations of whatever form of education you're giving to the children. And you please go ahead.
Yeah. I do have to say, though, the years before going to actual schooling, right, the parents start the education at home. And that is also part of that pivotal part. So what the parents teach at home is super important about how the child feels about themselves, how the child feels about the world around them. It's vital that the parents are part of that.
Okay, so Sherry, you have experience teaching in the Middle East, specifically in Egypt, and you have experience teaching in the United States, and you have good experience in both areas. So what are the basic similarities and differences between Egypt and the United States, you would say, in terms of education?
The similarities are way more than the differences, by the way. I think both places are struggling with how to catch people's attention or little kids' attention. The system at this point in both places, and has been for years, is a system of sit down, stop talking, and listen, or start writing, or just don't argue. What I tell you is the truth. And I think this is a huge issue that we have in the education system in both places and in many countries around.
So what you just said now might be very contrary to the perception that a lot of people have in their mind with regards to education in the United States. And, the stereotypes people might get from soap operas or movies or whatever is that students are sort of totally free and sometimes out of bounds even. So is this always the case? Like what you just described about education in the United States, was this always the case, or is this some form of a regression or a setback?
This has always been the case, and let's take it back historically, and this goes for both places. Education was made for factory workers. So they wanted the children to be ready for the factories. So the way to be ready is to sit down, learn to read and write, because you will need that to work the machines. But do not argue. We need yes people. We need people who are going to listen and bow and agree with whatever we're saying. Or even if you don't agree, you don't have the right to speak. So that has been the historical thing. Right now, there is a bit of an evolution where we are not doing that anymore, where we are getting better at giving children the right to speak, allowing them to think for themselves. Remember, the internet is here. So now things are completely different. You can try to hold the information in, but the internet has opened it up. So we, as teachers, are trying to catch up to that. And as a society, we're trying to catch up to that. And our kids are way ahead of us, which is absolutely wonderful to watch.
So again, one might wonder, like, are you exactly saying that education in the United States is very similar to Egypt? Like, there is a huge discrepancy in the number of students, the ratio of students to teachers. And again, the funding of schools, the playgrounds, the activities, having to wear a uniform, research facilities, research papers. So don't you think like you're being a little bit unfair, or maybe too unfair in the minds of some people towards the education in the United States? If you say it's quite similar, or like so similar to the Egyptian system?
I'm talking about the system itself. I'm not talking about the details of numbers in classes and stuff like, or uniforms and none of that. That is not what I was thinking of when I'm talking about this. I am talking about the system in place. You have a teacher who's the head. You have a bunch of kids, a bunch of people, whatever age they are sitting down and listening the whole time. Yes, of course, there is a difference in numbers right now, but when I was teaching in Egypt, we had the same number as now. So I had 33 students, and I have had 33 students in the United States as well. The playground seems to be the same as far as I'm concerned. You have to remember there's a socioeconomic issue that we need to discuss as well when it comes to education. Not all education is equal. Not all schools are equal. Not all areas are equal. Not all populations are equal.
Absolutely. But if we talk about the current, situation in Egypt and the current situation in the United States, let me pose this question again. How similar and how different are they? Egypt now, in the United States now, if we're talking about public education, not private, not international schools. Yeah.
No, there are major differences for sure. The preparedness of teachers, the ability of teachers to know different things, especially computers and all that. The ability of kids to know more about certain topics. That's a huge difference. The numbers, like you've said, I never even thought of the numbers, by the way. But yes, the huge difference in numbers for sure. The uniform issue is iffy because we do have a lot of public schools that do have uniforms. So that's a bit iffy depending on where you are.
But again, the rapport between like the students and the teachers, like the relation of the student, vis-a-vis other teachers as well, would you say they're similar in Egypt and the United States, or are they completely different?
No, I'd say they're very different. They definitely are. At this point, like I said before, we are always trying to catch up to what the newest stuff that's going on, and we try with our students, and our students consider us more like friends. And you have to be very clear and say, no, sweetie, I'm not your friend. I am your teacher. I love you, but I'm not your friend. We are teacher and student. You have to be very clear about that. You don't want to blur any lines. But in Egypt, there's none of that. In Egypt, it's like, you're the teacher, you're scary. I should be worried about being around you. There's none of that here, thankfully.
And again, like how satisfied are teachers in the United States versus Egypt? So like if we're talking about like, the salaries, the kind of neighborhoods that teachers would live in, the kind of life, the socioeconomic situation of a teacher in Egypt versus in the United States, how similar or how different are they?
I can't compare because I don't know what's happening in Egypt now. I've been gone for many, many, many years, 30 something years, right? So things have changed. But I know I was not getting paid much at the time. But at the same time, here we're always the lowest paid people in all of work normally. We are not appreciated as the educators that we are, as the professionals that we are. We're not appreciated, even though we have many, many, many degrees. Many of us, we have to have the bachelor's, of course. Many of us have the master's, many have the doctorate, and that is not appreciated. So the pay of teachers seems to be an issue for both.
Okay, so the last question I want to ask in this area before we delve deeper into extremism and moderation is that there is the system like Montessori education. Right. So you said that current way of education is like you're just dictating students, you're filling bottles or cans. It came with the Industrial Revolution. So the Industrial Revolution needs clerks, needs just people to sit on tables and do some, paperwork, and they want just, clones. They want clones from, exactly identical people. So if you're in the first grade, everybody in the first grade gets the same stuff. Everybody in the 10th grade would get the same stuff. No difference. But there's another system, which is the Montessori system, which sort of, again, tries to tweak itself, or like would cater to every individual student's needs.
That's true.
How successful do you think Montessori education is? Would you think that should be the norm? That a way out of this predicament we're in right now? Is that a way out?
So the issue with Montessori that I see is kids who have been in, and many people might disagree with me, but this is my experience. Many little ones who have been in Montessori, once they get to actual school, they have a very hard time because they do need to follow regular school rules and the ways that we do things, versus in Montessori, you are walking around, you are doing what you feel like doing, and you're learning the whole time. You're touching things, you are, hands-on and everything. In your regular school, that is not going to happen most of the time.
But if we make, like Montessori education the norm, like where there's no other option, so it's only Montessori, so we cater to every specific individual student's needs. So we do a needs assessment at the beginning for every single student. So not a group needs assessment, no, an individual needs assessment. And then we would create something, or we tweak the syllabus if there is a syllabus or like, you know, some guidelines. We tweak them, or we tailor them actually for every single student. Would you recommend something like that?
The Netherlands does that, right? In the Netherlands, they have supposedly the best education in the whole world, and they do go by that. They've managed to do that somehow. There is the funding, there's the teacher education, there's the parent education, there's the kids who understand what's going on. I'm sure it's doable, and I'd love to try something like that. But the funding needs to be there. You know what? Not just the funding, but the desire for funding, the desire to really have kids who know what they're doing, who understand how to deal with the world.
Okay, so moving now to extremism and moderation, as the, you know, the title of this episode here. It's on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is no effect at all, 10, 100%. So how much do you think that education, or early childhood education, to what extent does early childhood education affect you later on in your life and play a role in making you an extremist or a moderate person? From 0 to
I'd say about an 8.
an 8. So it plays a
About an 8. Major role. But of course, there's a caveat there, right? It's not all just an 8. It all depends on what happens after that beginning, after the youngest years. What is going on? Are we continuing with the extremism and the extremist thoughts, or are we, you know, making it less, right? We are easing on that extremism. And then there could be some kind of adjustment, because humans adjust, right? We are very good at adjusting. And no matter what happens to us, there's a way that we will find to come out. But we have to have that breath of fresh air. You have to get your head above water to be able to breathe.
And what elements of education, like what is the ideal mix really to have a moderate student, and what is the evil mix to have an extremist student? What elements are needed to provide education for extremist people, or what elements are needed to provide education for moderate people?
It's a very hard question. The elements that you need, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, and that's my style, a lot of love, a lot of understanding, a lot of bringing students in instead of having them be far away from good behavior and good ideas. And I, the word good, I can't find a better word, but you know what I mean by good, right? Positive. Ideas about themselves, first of all, and about society, and about religion, and about education, and about learning. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question.
I think you are actually, but okay, let's zoom in a little bit more. So things that can really affect students' way of behavior and thinking are subjects, like things like civics and social studies in general, and things again, like religion, if there's religious teaching at all. And most important, again, I think, is the relationship between the student and the teacher. Like, does the teacher just spoon feed the student?
Correct.
And the student is just taught to never defy the teacher's will, and they should follow whatever is ordained?
Right.
Or do they have a bigger mandate and they have the ability to discuss and argue?
Right.
So,
Definitely everything you're saying, Mohammed. Now I understand where you're getting, where the question's going. Definitely social studies is vital. History is amazing. Um, History has to be taught and has to be taught correctly without all the changes that have happened. It has to be an honest history lesson. You can't paint over things and make them look good. You can't sugarcoat things. Um, Religion. Now that would be a difference between Egypt and here. So in Egypt, even myself as a student in Egypt, we had a religion a lesson. I think it was twice or three times a week. I can't remember. And some of us were pulled out and the rest would stay because of different religions, that type of thing. However, here in the United States, in public school, this does not happen. There is um, a separation between state and church. And church does not mean church. It means laws. What we're talking about is the separation of laws and beliefs. These two have to be completely separate. So that is what I work in right now. I work in a place where religion is not taught. It has nothing to do with school. School is here for math, science, reading, writing, social studies, and socializing. If you want religion, you have to go to your own place of worship.
So you think that segregation of students during a religion lesson plays a role? So segregation starts early on when you take a group of students aside for religion A and keep students in the class for religion B.
Right.
While this does not happen in public schools in the United States. But at the same time, the United States, you have Catholic schools, you have evangelical schools as well.
Of course.
So if we compare the public schools in the United States versus evangelical or Catholic schools, do you think that public schools tend to have more moderate students compared to evangelical or Catholic schools?
Moderate on certain things, yes. Moderate when it comes to religion and dogma and stuff like that. But most of the people who have been shooting schools in high school are in public schools. So that's a different kind of extremism. So the gun situation has a lot to do with schools lately in the last, 10 years, 15 years. So are we talking just moderation in religion, or are we talking a moderate person in general?
Okay, so let's take it one factor at a time here.
Yeah.
So if you're taught religion versus if you're not taught religion in school, and this does not mean that you have to be irreligious or an atheist. No, you can be a strong believer, but you'll just receive your education in the church or the mosque or the synagogue or the temple, whatnot, but not in the school.
Correct.
Versus if you're taught, religion in your school.
Yeah.
Do you think that this can play a role in making one side more moderate religiously and the other one more extremist religiously?
Yes, I think it has something to do with it. A little bit, yes. Not a lot, because you still have the people who are in religious schools who act up as well, who don't believe as much or make fun of what they're being taught. You still have, both sides on. So there is no really rule for it at this point. There is no rule that says if you teach religion, you'll be an extremist. But I guess it's what you teach in religion. It's not religion, per se. What are you teaching the child?
Okay, so it's not the subject, but the content and the way of delivery. You would say this is the pivotal thing. Okay.
Yeah, it's just coming to me as I'm talking. Yeah, it is not what It's the how. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, again, staying with religious extremism.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the amount of education one receives plays a major role in making them an extremist, or let's say even more vulnerable to become extremists, or not? So, like, if I just finished my elementary education versus someone who graduated from university, the likelihood of one of them becoming an extremist, is it the same or is it different between someone?
It's definitely. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, between someone with minimal education and someone
Right.
with high education.
Right. No, there's a huge difference, definitely. Again, if especially going to college, right? So, middle school, high school, college, this is where you start knowing who you are and what
Mm.
you want in life, and you have a goal, or you're not sure of who you are even, and you're looking for who you are. And hopefully you'll go to college and learn who you really are and what you want to do. This keeps you busy. This keeps your brain working in a completely different way. You're not just sitting there thinking about, woe me, poor me, I don't have money, or I don't have education, or I don't have friends, or whatever it is that makes people go into that extremist situation. Um, Stay busy, make sure that you're understanding the world around you. The world is huge. There's
Mm.
science that we can learn. There's so much math and math ideas, mathematical ideas that we can focus on that's going to help humanity. Let's focus on that instead of thinking of the afterlife all the time. Of course, go ahead and think of the
Yeah.
afterlife, but it shouldn't be our main focus,
You
in my
know,
opinion.
the flip of this coin here would say that in many countries and in the Middle East and in many other parts of the world, the leaders of a lot of extremist groups are very highly educated.
Oh, yeah.
So how can you define that? Like, how is that? Are they really extremists from within, or do they just know how to manipulate the masses because of their high education?
They're, I love that because obviously they're smart enough to go through with their college, with especially all the physicians who are leaders of these terrorist groups, doctors, for heaven's sake, who have been to school for years and years. So that is probably part of it, Muhammad, where they know how to manipulate people and they have the key words and the key ideas to manipulate the less educated people. But, but what I'm thinking also, but that's just me, people who have gone through that, through, trying to be a doctor, right? I want to be a doctor. I'm going to go through the steps and I'm going to learn things. It doesn't mean I'm thinking. It just means that I am learning these things. I'm just knowing it rote and I can write on a paper. I'm not understanding. I'm not into it. I'm not part of it. What I'm thinking about is death in the end, right? Or what am I going to do before I die? Or so I can die and meet the Lord, right? Or whoever.
And here it is again, like there is usually a misconception
Mm,
that the higher your academic grade is, the smarter you are.
right.
Or the higher academic grade is, the more you know in general, not only in a specific field.
Correct.
And
Thank you for saying that. Yes, you're right. You're right. That
and,
was, but back, in Egypt, learning is rote learning, really, mostly. And if you know certain parts and you go into a test and you put them down, you are going to pass with flying colors. So that rote learning needs to be changed. We need the understanding. We need the dedication to the topic.
and talking about something like civics and history.
Mm.
So in the Middle East, for example, you're usually taught, like these are the good people, these are the bad people. This is what you're taught in history. And, we tend to glorify some people, we slander others, and you're taught this way.
Right.
You cannot argue that, no, why and why not.
Right, right.
While in the West today, they're starting to, question a lot of things that were taken for granted in history.
Finally, yes.
Yeah, so definitely, like here in Canada, for instance, there is extensive research about, the history of First Nations and the amount of indignities that were done to the First Nations.
Yes.
And African Canadians and so on. Same thing in the United States. In the United States, I don't think it has been acknowledged as much as Canada yet, but it's still getting there.
We're getting there.
Yeah, still getting there. So how important do you think this is now that people are starting to admit, yes, we made a mistake. Yes, like our history is not always great. No, there is a lot of bloodshed, a lot of, indignities, a lot of injustice, a lot of oppression that were done towards other people. How important do you think it is for a nation to admit its, shortcomings and the negative things that they committed? How important is this in shaping the mind of a young student?
It's vital. It is absolutely vital. And it's vital for the people who were harmed and vital for the people whose ancestors harmed others. It's vital for both groups. It's important to know my background, the real background, and what happened to me and my family. It's important to know what my family has done to these people. Not because we're going to hate them, but because we learn from our mistakes. This is a whole idea of this happened, we need to acknowledge it, and now we are going to fix it and move on. There are people who have taken things to extremes. Again, back to the extremes that we're talking about. Well, if you're a certain color, you're bad because you hurt other people, that type of thing. We have this going on, and it's the pendulum swinging the other way, right? The pendulum was, we are perfect, we are wonderful. Now the pendulum swinging to, we are horrible because we did this. I am waiting for the pendulum to kind of get to the middle, and everybody will acknowledge their part in things.
Now, if we stay in the United States as well, like people have witnessed lately, everyone around the world has witnessed, a major divisive, like rhetoric in the United States still going on, and there is a clear split between two sides.
Yes.
And and we've recently even witnessed, the trial of former president, and there are a lot of threats of people, like going on strikes and whatnot. And where does this come from? Like, is there like a relationship between the amount of education or the kind of education that some Americans receive and them becoming more extremist in their points of view?
For sure. For sure. When I'm raised to believe that I am better than everyone else, and then suddenly someone comes to you and says, you're good, but, there were issues in your ancestry. It makes people angry. And this is this is the nature of humanity, right? I'm perfect, I'm wonderful, and then you find out you're not. Cognitive dissonance. I mean, you know the truth, you just don't want to acknowledge it. It's very hard for your brain to acknowledge that. And it takes time, and it might take generations. So I'm hoping that after I pass, right, people are going to start calming down about this kind of stuff. And where is it coming from? It's scary. It's scary.
Now, the general image is that usually people in the South usually are supporters of the right wing,
right,
versus people of the North who tend to be, again, usually supporters of the, I wouldn't say the left, but, center left, maybe.
sure,
Not always, of
more
course.
liberal,
Yeah, there are some exceptions here and there. They're more liberal,
right,
others are more conservative.
right.
So, how's education in the South versus the North? Is it the same or is it different? Again, the tendency of parents to send their children to religious schools versus public schools, is it the same or is it different in the North and the South?
I've spoken to many teachers online from everywhere around the world. We've had discussions and stuff. And you are right. Most people from the South, even teachers, are extremely conservative. And they defend their conservatism to death. There is a difference between the conservative parts of the country and the liberal parts, the South and otherwise. In that I'm trying. Okay, so the liberals have the idea that everyone has the right to behave the way they want or to be who they want, versus the conservatives are more like, but religion says we shouldn't and we shouldn't and we shouldn't, and we are going to go with that. I think that's where the rift is. Separation of church and state versus church is part of who I am, and that's what people have said. Church is part of who I am. I'm not going to change that, and I don't want to change that.
And this seems to be like rather ironic again, because the United States is considered to be one of the very leading democracies and secular countries in the world. But at the same time, most presidents of the United States were white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, with the exception of very, very few of them. Yeah, so
One, actually.
we have the current president and President Kennedy, who was assassinated.
Right.
So, and again, we've seen President Trump, hold the Bible and
Upside down.
exactly. So we've seen quotations. We've seen, George W. Bush talk about a crusade.
That's true.
So, what's going on here? Like, is there a drift? Like, is there real secularism, or is it just something on the surface? And if you dig deeper, things are more extreme.
I'll add to what you just said, and I'll say the Supreme Court now is more religious, more conservative, more Catholic, just to be clear. So yes, we try to pride ourselves on being more liberated, more liberal, more open, and the facts are the facts. And there has not been a single president of the United States that is not Christian. Every single one has been a Christian. VP, same thing. Vice presidents, not a single one has been non-Christian. And they all have to go through the motions of going to church, showing people that they're church people, even when they're not. And Trump is one of our examples, but there are many others. Everyone has to prove that I am more religious than you. This has to do with the political power of evangelicals, certain sects. Let's just say that, but evangelicals are.
Yeah, because like the only anomalies we have is Barack Obama, who's not white, and although he's half white, he's not fully African, but he's half white. And current president, so Joe Biden, who's Catholic, and Kennedy, who was Catholic and assassinated.
Right.
But we never had a woman.
Right.
And we never had a non-Christian.
right?
So,
And now we have Kamala Harris, thankfully, the first female vice president.
but
Finally, we have something.
yeah, and she's Catholic too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Uh,
So but again, it was mostly white Anglo-Protestant men.
yes.
So um so do you think that actually education did not play the proper role in the United States yet in really spreading the proper secular form of life?
I'll tell you the truth, what I feel. I have zero proof of that. That's just me. I think education has done a good job in the last 10, 15, maybe 20 years, which is why the rise of the conservatives has happened in the last few years. That rise of conservatism is because people have become more liberal, people have become more open, or most people, or many people, the majority, to the point that Barack Obama was president. And this drove people crazy in the conservative area. What do you mean you are going to bring a liberal, not just liberal, but African American, who is not even Christian? Of course, we had to prove again and again that he is Christian, but he was always told that he is not Christian. They believed he is not Christian. It was a huge issue. So I think education played a good role in getting people to understand. But the pendulum, right? The pendulum is not, it went a certain way and they did not like it.
And we've seen cartoons, for instance, like for The Simpsons or The Family Guy, becoming a Muslim. And in both, like The Family Guy and The Simpsons, we've seen that they've become terrorists. So if you're Muslim, then automatically you're a terrorist. And again, so cartoons and soap operas and media can spread a lot of perceptions, a lot of misconceptions, and do a lot of brainwashing. So what is the role of education in being an antidote against this brainwashing?
No, no, we can't compete. Are you kidding me? We cannot compete with media. We cannot compete with movies and cartoons and video games and the violence on video games. And no, and that's where our issue is right now. Where's the balance? How are we going to balance this? As much as we do in the classroom, which is bring in media, we bring in a lot of media, we discuss media, we write about media, we compare and contrast the book to the movie, all that stuff. We cannot compete with media.
And again, going back to education, socially, if we talk about socially, like to what extent can education affect the children and make them aspire or wish to be moderate men and women who respect each other, who respect other genders, who respect the children, and so on and so forth, rather than being an oppressor who would never accept any discussion with the other weaker gender, in their opinion, or with younger children?
So the one thing that I'm seeing and I'm loving in my own classroom, I have a very diverse classroom. I have everything and everyone under one roof. And they love each other and they help each other. I have one girl who has a veil on, right? And when she falls, she's very active and she runs and stuff. So her veil sometimes gets moved and you can see some hair. You see a bunch of girls going around her and then they help her fix her hair and stuff like that. They understand that this is how she is and we are going to respect that because that's her religion. Vice versa happens. Lent, and they're fasting. Hey, you know what? So and so is fasting. We better be careful. Same thing with Ramadan. it's amazing to watch actually our students interact with each other. Um, so I've seen that, and I think it makes a huge difference, and it brings compassion into your life. You understand that this person's a little different than I am, dresses differently or talks differently. Myself being a teacher from Egypt, right, an Egyptian woman who's Egyptian American, and I have a thick accent. And that's the first thing I say. I say, I'm sorry if you don't understand me with my accent. And they go, oh, no, we understand you. So it brings compassion to the other. And I think that makes a huge difference.
Okay, you know, like a very common thing that happens here in Canada is that there is always this, you know, hot discussion going on between first and second generation Canadians. So a lot of second generation Canadians tend to accuse their parents of being extremist or being racist. And so some people think that in the future, in the very near future, if we are talking about a conflict or a struggle, or like, I don't want to say war, but some kind of confrontation, it will not be a confrontation of nation versus another nation, or religion versus another religion, or culture versus culture, but rather it will be a confrontation between extremism and moderation.
Mm-hmm.
To what extent do you agree with this?
Conflict is the thing I wish for the least, to be honest with you. I like peace and I like calm and I like to leave everyone to do what they want, but if they infringe on my freedom, then I'm going to have to be confrontational. And I think that will be happening. There's a huge possibility for it to happen. And that has to do also with being liberal and being conservative. I think that's part of that. This group will go with one group and this group will go with another. And it's going to be a multifaceted conflict worldwide.
And do you think that this gap between first and second generation immigrants is because of the difference in education and culture that they were brought up in?
Certainly, and thank you for going back to that. Yes, what I've seen is the parents being in the United States. I'm going to talk about the United States. They are scared that their kids are going to not learn their religion, not understand what their religion is. So they close them in as much as they can because they know that eventually the kids will be freer. So as little ones, they close them in and they refuse to even discuss anything. And that causes an issue with our students. But I know that as the kids grow older, they shed all that and they live their own life.
Absolutely, absolutely. So just living in your own ghetto and your own self-made diaspora is really, really extremely destructive to the youth and to everyone. So last but not least, yeah, please go ahead, please.
But Mohammed, they still have the internet, which is my hope in life. And yes, the internet can be used in very bad ways. I get that, but it can be used in the most amazing ways, and the kids know that. So the kids are closed in within the family with certain rules and stuff, but they have the internet that shows them what life is really like. So I like them. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, sure. So last but not least, like in the Middle East, people are complaining about the lack of democracy and lack of equality and this and that. Do you think it all starts in education, with education? Like, do you think that democracy starts in the school, moderation starts in the school, respect of other genders start in the school as well?
Certainly, certainly. And how the teacher talks and the messages, the continuous, even the subliminal messages that the teachers will give. When you're little, you're absorbing everything around you. And you're listening to everything. So you hear it at home, you see it in school. School should be the right school. We always say school is the equalizer. Public school is the equalizer. It should be the equalizer for religion and for extremism and for everything. It should flatten all of that. But when you hear it in school, when kids are being punished for not wearing a veil to school, that is an issue. That message is very clear to every student in there, no matter what their religion, no matter what their socioeconomic status is. School and what is being taught in school is vital for the sanity of society, to be honest with you.
And do you think, again, if we stop having these like Islamic schools, Catholic schools, evangelical schools, this and that, and we just resort to public schools, period, public secular education, do you think that this will make things much better?
No, I have a problem with that too. Because if I am not going to allow religion in my school, I can't prevent also people having their own religious schools. That is unfair. Hey, you want religion in your schools, make your own, is what we're saying. But when you come to my school, you are not going to deal with religion. So it has to be equal. No, they have to have their own schools.
But isn't that a loophole in the system? Like,
It's fair, even if it's a loophole. It's fairness because you have a right. But okay, I'll take you back. Homeschooling. We have a thing called homeschooling.
Yeah.
Where parents, and this has been happening a lot in the South, a lot with the religious people here in the United States, because they feel like our schools, public schools, are indoctrinating their children. Because we say that LGBTQ community is fine. There was slavery, there was torture, Native Americans, all of these things are indoctrinations in their opinion. So they keep the kids at home and teach them whatever they want. Now that's a loophole. That's more of a loophole than the religious schools. Because now you don't even have a teacher, you have a parent who is saying, who's giving information. That's a scary thing. That is the scary one.
Well, Sherry, at the end of this interview, I really have to thank you very much. Of course, it's a very, very long topic that we can talk about for ages and ages. But really, thank you very much for shedding light on some of the most important issues. And really looking forward to having you time and again with us. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you so much.
Thanks. And dear viewers, if we were here to sort of recap, really, just like Sherry said here, like education really starts at home. It starts at home, it starts in the very first years of a child's life. And, in the adoptive countries or countries of immigration, people come from all four corners of the globe. They come from all walks of life and they believe in all different kinds of faith, or they might believe in none. Some are atheists, some are deists, some are like theists, some are like Gnostic, agnostic, whatnot. But the problem is that a lot of those people, they come only with their bodies, but their minds and hearts are still there in their countries of origin or in their culture of origin. And they tend to create their own ethnic silo. They create their silo, their own diaspora, their own ghetto, where their children are brainwashed, they're spoon-fed specific things through schools that are, that might seem from the outside, from the facade, to be regular schools teaching everything like other schools, but all the secular education that they might receive in these schools are actually really immersed and dipped in a lot of extremism. And so they're like time bombs within these liberal societies. And again, you know, if I'm taught in a specific kind of school and then I go to a public university, it's a trauma. Like they're traumatized, and this might create a lot of psychological problems for these students. And they would hate the society as well that they're living in. And they're always torn between the hammer and the anvil. The parents telling them something, their schools telling them something, but when they go out in the street, life is very different. On the other hand, in the Middle East, we might have things are more like uniform, but again, you are taught to listen, to follow the orders. You're taught, you're dictated who's good and who's bad since day one. You have no right at all to argue, to discuss, to ask for more feedback from the teacher, or for the teacher to ask for feedback from the students. No, it's only a one-way education. So from the teacher to the student, they're dictated. And of course, again, the status of a teacher being living in a very, very poor environment, always in need, so makes them very, very vulnerable. Again, to I might just have to teach what the students want to hear, what the students want, what the government wants, because I'm so vulnerable. So, and like Sherry said again, education might be very strong, but media has the leverage and has the upper hand. And last but never least, in education, we're not really very much interested in the special abilities of every single child, rather than just getting a long line of people to the workforce so that they can work in factories, work in firms, work for the government and whatnot. And this is killing a lot of abilities, and a lot of potentials are being destroyed and slaughtered every day. I think it's about time for us to really pay more attention to the importance of education, because this is what makes us human after all. Dear viewers, until we meet again, I hope you have a very pleasant time. Thanks for watching.